Erich Ludendorff, as we know, was the great general, German general of World War I. With Hindenburg, he was the virtual military dictator of Germany during World War I. Ludendorff created the Ludendorff offensives in the spring of 1918. And so Hitler and Ludendorff get together and start working together and planning to take power. Now, and if anything, Hitler or Ludendorff's policies are even more extreme than Hitler. In fact, Ludendorff will eventually leave the Nazi Party and will leave his alliance with Hitler because the Nazis weren't extreme enough for him. Okay, but so Hitler and Ludendorff here are working together, and Hitler's association with Ludendorff brings him respectability. It brings him about a certain amount of respectability because most middle-class Germans respect Ludendorff. They respect Ludendorff. So by associating himself with Ludendorff, Hitler's gaining some middle-class respectability here. But he also finds another follower at this time who also brings him some middle-class respectability, and this is Hermann Goring. Of course, he's going to be one of the bigwigs. Eventually, he'll be the number 2 man in the Nazi structure, hierarchy. But Hermann Goring, he's the son of... we talked about the Goring that was the civil administrator in the German colonies during the murder of the Herreros, the genocide of the Herreros. He's his son. So Hermann Goring he comes from an upper middle class background. He's low level nobility or something like that, but he's very respectable. He flew in the same squadron as the Red Baron. It was called von Richthofen's Flying Circus. He flew in that same squadron, and at the end of the war, he is in command of it. The Red Baron is shot down in April of 1918. By the end of the war, Goring commands the Flying Circus there. If memory serves, I think if I remember correctly, he was ordered to land all of his planes in France and surrender the planes to the French. And I think, if memory serves, he ordered all of his men to climb really high, bail out of the planes, and just let the planes crash, rather than hand them over to the Germans, or to the French. He, too, brings middle-class respectability, because a lot of middle-class Germans respect him, and he's able to kind of move in those circles that Hitler wasn't, because Hitler's kind of this lower-class guy. He doesn't kind of have the same manners and respectability that upper-class people do. So he kind of hitches his wagon to people like Ludendorff and Goring who can give him access to those circles there. And it works. More middle-class people start saying, well, if Ludendorff's on board with this, and if Goring's on board with this, maybe there's something to it. Now, the head of the Bavarian state government is a fellow by the name of Gustav von Kahr. And Hitler had been negotiating with Kahr Kahr is a right-wing figure. He is a figure of the political right, okay? And he had been negotiating with von Kahr to have the Nazis share some kind of power in the government. Von Kahr was making promises. Well, we'll bring in, a couple of Nazis and give them positions in the government. But Kahr doesn't trust Hitler, so he's kind of scared of Hitler and scared of this movement. At the same time, he thinks maybe he can co-opt the movement and kind of use it for his own purposes. So he's kind of making a lot of promises to Hitler that he's kind of vague on. Okay, eventually we'll do this. We'll kind of, eventually maybe we'll bring some of your guys in here. But as I say, Kahr doesn't trust him, and Hitler's kind of feeling like he's being jerking around, right? He kind of feels like this guy's making these promises. He's not serious. So Hitler starts, by the fall of 1923, Hitler starts really thinking this guy is screwing him over. Well, von Kahr makes an announcement that on the night of November 8th, 1923, he is going to hold a meeting in one of the local beer halls in Munich, and he's going to make a speech And the beer hall, I think the hall could hold about 3,000 people. So it's a pretty big political rally. And as soon as he makes this announcement, Hitler's like, well, he's up to something. What's he up to? So Hitler is like pushing him. Okay, we need to have a meeting. We need to discuss what's going to happen. We need to discuss what's going to happen. Because Hitler's afraid he's going to do something, and Kahr's going to do something, and he's going to get left out of it. And he's tired of being left out of it, right? So Kahr kind of refuses to take his calls. He kind of puts them off. And so Hitler is kind of saying, yeah, he's using me. He's been using me because we've been in these negotiations for power, so we've been kind of going easy. I've been telling my followers to go easy on the Bavarian government, and he's using me. He's using me. So on the night of November 8th, Kahr begins to speak. Kahr begins to speak. And then Hitler bursts into the beer hall with a number of his followers. He raises his pistol into the air, and he fires his pistol into the air. He says, "The national revolution has begun." Now, the implication is there's uprising like this all over Germany, which was not the case. It was really just, this was the revolution, right? He says the beer hall is surrounded by 600 armed men, Nazi followers. The beer hall was surrounded by 600 armed men, and he says no one is allowed to leave. No one is allowed to leave. He takes von Kahr and several other leading politicians there into a back room, and he says, we need to talk. So he takes a few guys into the back room. Literally at gunpoint, he makes them agree to join him. He essentially says, you're going to join me or else. They agree. Hitler goes out, he makes a speech, and he holds up von Kahr's hand and another guy's hand. He says, we're united in this kind of new far-right government that we're going to take over here in Germany. The crowd cheers its assent. They say, oh, okay, yeah, this is a good thing. The reality was, had Hitler succeeded, it's unlikely the French would have allowed such a far-right militarist government to exist. But nevertheless, Hitler starts ordering a lot of his followers to take key buildings and key areas in the city, transportation, communication hubs. Essentially, it's a coup, right? He's trying to mount a coup here. Again, the word Putch means coup in German, right? Hitler briefly leaves the beer hall to go to some of these places and make sure everything is going as promised. While he is gone, von Kahr and these other leaders go to Ludendorff's left in charge. Okay, Ludendorff is in charge in the beer hall. Von Kahr and these other leaders, they go to Ludendorff and they say, hey, we need to go home to tell our families we're okay. We want to get some of our belongings so that we know it's going to be a while so we can work. And we'll be right back. And Ludendorff says, okay, I have your word as gentlemen that you'll be coming right back. Yeah, we just want to tell our families what's going on. All right, go ahead. So he lets him go. Well, Hitler comes back and he asks where they are, and Ludendorff says, oh, they went home. And he's like, what? Why did you let them go? And von Kahr says, don't worry, they've given me their word as gentlemen. They'll be back. They support us. They'll be back. But of course, rightly, they go to the proper authorities and they say, we were just held hostage. We need to put this thing down. This Hitler guy's crazy. We need to stop this thing. So by the next morning, Hitler's depressed, right? He's lost his ace in the hole, von Kahr and these other guys that he needed. And critically, by the morning, he was expecting huge crowds to show up to support him. He was expecting huge crowds to show up to support him. They don't. These crowds do not materialize. Now, some of Hitler's supporters, one of the key buildings in Munich that they took over was the army building, the army headquarters building in Munich. So they took over the army headquarters building in Munich, and now, by the morning, police have put a ring around it. So essentially the building is under siege. Ludendorff simply states, we march. We march. Meaning, we're going to march from the beer hall to the army building, and as we march, people will see us, they will see what we're doing, and they will come out to support us. Okay? They'll come out to support us. So on the morning of November 9, 1923, Hitler, Ludendorff, and all their followers, they leave the beer hall and they start marching toward the army building. As they're marching, a few times police units come and they block their way. Police augmented by army, they block their way. They see Ludendorff, and they get nervous. We're not, Ludendorff was this great war hero. Are we going to fire on Ludendorff? So they would scatter. These barricades would come up. They'd see it was Ludendorff, and then they'd leave. This happens 2 or 3 times. So the Nazis are feeling pretty confident. Hitler's feeling pretty confident here. They're good. They're supporting us. The people are supporting us. But then, not long before they get to the army building, another barricade appears, and they say, okay, let's march toward them. They're not going to fire on us. So they link arms. The Nazi leaders, Hitler's in the front row, Ludendorff's next to him. They link arms, and they start walking toward this barricade. Now, unlike the earlier barricades, which had just kind of dissolved, this one refuses to stand aside, and they open fire. They open fire. They kill several of Hitler's supporters. Several more are wounded. The guy right next to Hitler gets hit and pulls him down. I think it dislocated his shoulder. Hermann Goring actually got hit in the crotch. And subsequently, he'll actually be nursed to health by some Jewish women who were in the neighborhood, found him and helped him. And he will later, when the persecution of the Nazis or the Jews get really bad, he'll actually give passes for these 2 women to leave Germany. Hitler himself is, like I say, slightly wounded. His shoulder was, I think it was dislocated, or there was some other issue there. Pretty quickly, the Nazis scatter. They just start running in every direction. Many of them get out of the country. Many of them flee the country. One of Hitler's followers, his name is Putz Hauptstadel. You don't need to know that right now. Putz Hauptstadel. Hitler actually runs to his house. Putz Hauptstadel was married to an American wife. Her name is Helen. And they were both great admirers of Hitler. So Hitler runs into this house, and Putz wasn't home, but Helena was. And he actually is like, oh, it's all over, I'm going to go to jail. He gets depressed. He gets incredibly depressed. He pulls out a gun, and he puts it to the side of his head. Hitler is going to blow his own brains out. And Helena Hauptstadel, this American woman, talks him out of killing himself. She talks him out of killing himself. 2 days later, the police arrive, and they arrest Hitler, and he goes quietly. Hitler tries to take power by force, and he fails. He tries a revolution, an armed uprising, and it fails. And this is a critical moment in kind of the development of his worldview and his tactics, as we will see here.